If you are an active duty service member ready to transition out of the military, a loving spouse seeking support and resources on how to cope with PTSD, or maybe a military brat ready to take the next steps to join the Air Force, or a veteran wanting to connect with others through shared experiences, then this is the right podcast for you. My name is Laura Figures, and this is the Freedom Isn't Free podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Laura Figures. First, thank you for joining me each and every single week as we continue to bring you inspiring stories and resources that address is freedom free. Today, we continue our discussion with Jose Belen about his work within the community and establishing the Freedom Factory flag company. Now, Jose, can you explain to me a little bit about your transition from the military and the next steps you took?
Absolutely. When we get out of service, we're, kind of given a little transition, some transition points from the military, but it's really up to us to kind of come out here and figure it out. And so, that's around the time that you start realizing that you're triggered. You have the nightmares and, those situations, but also out in public or professionally, for me, it was anytime I saw the color red, it took me right back to when I was downrange and having to, navigate through civilian life, with those thoughts and not letting anyone around you know is quite difficult. And so, my role as an entrepreneur is still new. I founded the Freedom Factory Flag Co. LLC on 30 June 2020 in memory of my best friend and captain who were killed over in Iraq, and also just all the men and women who sacrificed. So, the business had become successful because, I never intended on having one. I always say veterans get the label of being disabled, but that doesn't mean we're not enabled. But it's like, what does that really mean, Jose? And so, I'm years removed from my corporate career, which was, strong, thanks to God. But I also struggled through that. And part of the thing was I thought that, professional achievements and monetary success equaled happiness, being able to pay my mom's rent or, send, money to family if they need or friends, whatever, that would have been enough. But then I started realizing that, in the corporate world and the civilian world, that it's not necessarily like the military with that loyalty. And it's just two different universes. So throughout my time in corporate America, when changes directly had ramifications on the family and my colleagues' families, and I started to realize that it really came down to corporation, having to put its shareholders first before its employees. That really kind of said, wait a minute, I'm in an office, air conditioned every day, working from home, making a lot of money, but there's veterans killing themselves every hour outside these walls. I myself am struggling and near that point myself. There's got to be something else to life. And I was fortunate to start a small organization, Mission Zero Actual, along with my wife a few years back, on what started as a message, and to this day is still the same messages. We want to zero out veteran suicide. The mission is zero, but in that, we have to raise awareness and not so much focus on ending veteran suicide, but also the preventative space as well. So, in my mind, in our mind, it's like, okay, we're not only in the, arena to save veterans' lives, but also give veterans reasons to live again. But when you're that spearheaded, I'm speaking and, throughout that, I'm struggling. And it's like, well, who do I turn to? And a lot of my struggles that got me to where I am today happened once I left that corporate environment and I didn't have a direction. It was like, well, what now? Life still has to go on. You still have a family. And you still have to have that purpose again. And so I struggled, for a few years psychologically and emotionally, because I thought, by starting the mission and, getting the message out there that would, fulfill a void. But then, it became, okay, the message is out there. And I just met a mother that lost her son via suicide yesterday, and I'm in her house, and the mother says, how do we clean his remains? And in that moment, I say to myself and the other brothers that we had there in the home, we'll get on our knees right now and we'll clean it ourselves. But I became witness to what goes beyond the 22 suicides. What is, oh my God, how can a mother grieve if she's trying to figure out how to clean her, son's remains? Oh my God, like we have to figure that out. And so all these years, it's just been really going through that leap of faith, not knowing, where, the next day will lead. You just know that inside, I pray to God and say, Lord, why do I care so much? Because it is painful to stand before a casket of a decorated, Air Force NCO that shot himself in front of his sister, and snap at attention in front of strangers I don't even know, saying, brother, your life will not be defined by how you died, but rather, what you did while you were alive, and carry that forward. But in that time, you're starting to realize that it's not easy out there. I never felt comfortable at all talking about my PTSD diagnosis and all my issues because of fear of judgment, that my colleagues, would be afraid of me, that the management may hold that against me. And so while I was in this corporate machine performing well, I had all these deep-rooted personal things bottled up inside that were nearly leading to kill myself because I didn't feel safe. And then that's when I delved into corporate America. They have all these, big Fortune 500 corporations that have come together to create these veteran hiring initiatives. But when we looked at the data, a lot of these companies get kickbacks, financial kickbacks for hiring X amount of veterans or whatever.
You're right. You're absolutely right. It's funny that you say that because I do work for a Fortune 100 company and we do hire veterans, and you have my mind thinking like, maybe I need to go back, because we do have like a veterans network at my company where all the veterans come and they're able to have a conversation and have that camaraderie. And I'm wondering in my head, like, should I go back to this network and understand from them, do you guys feel safe to have this conversation about PTSD and how you're really feeling at work? Are there some triggers? How can we help support you?
This is what was uncovered when we really kind of looked into this, is that these corporations and companies do amazing jobs with the hiring initiatives, but I wanted to look at attrition and the retention ratio. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of these veterans, we start struggling as soon as we come home in that first job. Most veterans out of service leave their first, 80% of veterans after service, leave their first job within a year. And it's because while, yes, they're quick to onboard, how is a company equipped if this veteran does have a trigger on the sales floor one day? What is that call to action? Is this ultimately leading to attrition, to where it becomes an HR issue, or employees, colleagues feel unsafe, and then our veterans being terminated or let go because there really is no system in corporate America for a white collar, clean cut top performer, to then all of a sudden say, hey guys, last night I had a dream that, I was killed in an explosion, and then I saw kids dying next to me. And, in a corporate environment, someone says that, it's going to be kind of like, well, you're all right, bud. And it's because of my time in that arena, I experienced a lot of these things. And so it was when I realized that if I ever want to help end veteran suicide, if even save one life, I can't do it while still attached to the matrix per se, which is the 9 to 5 clock in, clock out, just as that there has to be a break point that, with the grace of God, my amazing wife and family and friends, that they say, you know what, let's figure it out somehow. And that's what really happened in 2017. Really just put myself out there with the message. veterans are killing themselves, called every church in Orlando, radio stations. Channel 6, Phil Deems, they do an amazing thing called Veterans Voices. They document veterans that are, coming back from service and doing great things in the community. And these were the first people that said, yes, we'll let you tell your story in hopes of raising awareness of veteran suicide. And it's like, once I got that first yes, it's like, all right, I just need to do this, 10 more times and never stop. Get 10 more yeses and just keep going. And so with that, the mission, didn't grow so much in structure, as we're still now kind of finding our path, as an organization to focus on, veterans that are struggling with addiction, perhaps, or the preventative space to mitigate that suicide and eliminate that, but also use this as a like a faith-based, kind of mission as well. And so in that process, you still have to kind of think outside the box. What can I do every day to deal with my struggles? And last Memorial Day, which historically has been a complete, nightmare, one way or another. It's like that and Veterans Day. And the reality for veterans, for us, it's like every day. But when it's like hyper focused and it's everywhere you go, and then you see these companies doing veterans discounts and all these things once a year, twice a year, for us, it's like, what the hell good are your mattress sales on Veterans Day when you have literally veterans out on the street that, let's not even focus on a mattress, they need a house. Why don't you focus on that? And that's when, I developed, this mindset that, what, we just got to continue to find each other. And so on Memorial Day last year, I just had this thought, because we wake up every day at zero. That's what in war is like zero. You reset at zero. Doesn't matter what you are at zero. And so every day I wake up at zero, clean slate, be a good human being. First thing I tell myself, and, with that, we know what our triggers are, what our demons are. And so on Memorial Day, for example, it's like, okay, I know today, anywhere I turn, I'm going to get texts, whatever, and I'm going to have to deal with the emotions and figure out a way to not just give in to alcohol at some point, and just end up an emotional wreck by the end of the night. I called my best friend that I made here in Florida in 2007, Juvenal Aviles. I said, brother, it's Memorial Day. I don't want to drink all day. And because ultimately, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son. It's like, I'm at the point now where I got to the point where it's like, I owe it to my wife, my kids, and everyone that is around me to fight and be decent. So like in that decision making, it's like, you know what? I'm not going to ruin Memorial Day for them, because they really understand the brevity of what it means for all of us in the Gunner Battalion and most, families that have lost soldiers. And so I said, let's go to Lowe's, get some wood, man, watch some YouTube videos, and I want to make a flag today. And, the minute I painted the first red stripe, I saw the images that I explained last week on last week's podcast, and I just felt something. And my buddy was so respectful of that. It's just me and him in his garage, and it's like this kind of just quiet. Don't know how, to do really any of this, never used a table saw, but it's like there was just a focus and a dedication that by the time, by the time this flag was done, there was just something inside of me that like felt like a healing in a way that I just never felt before. I was just so excited. I came home, I showed my wife. The next day, really sat down and understood what this meant, for me, just in the healing of it, that by chance, by making the right decision to not giving into that voice that says, you've never done this before, you can't do it. Not giving into the voice that says, man, just relax. You know what I'm saying? You got beer in the fridge. You don't got to go on. By not giving into the noise that you can't is when you find out that you can. And then from there, I was asked to make another flag, for a friend. And as I started making these flags, and I would tell him, I was like, well, I don't want to charge you guys. He said, no, hell, that, I want to, pay it forward, help you buy more materials. I'm like, okay, great. That in that process, as I'm starting to, build more flags for, grandparents that served in World War II, and it became just this very personal process in here that I forced myself to get better at. I was able to focus, but in that, think of my buddies and think of what I'm really building in an American flag. It's a symbol. And so my journey into the entrepreneurial space came from what was pretty much my biggest pain and what was nearly the result of me killing myself because I was so fogged up in everything. And I also have to credit medical cannabis in this.
So Jose, can you tell us a little bit about your activism for cannabis? You spoke about it. Can we just dive a little bit deeper? What are some of the things that you've done to promote cannabis?
Absolutely. So in 2017, I was fortunate to be invited to my first medical cannabis conference in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, and Montel Williams happened to be the keynote speaker at this event, and it was a Friday-Saturday event. So I got there Friday, and Friday there was a kind of like a private get-together, and the next day was the conference, and the conference was actually starting with a veterans moment of silence. Pretty incredible. So my mindset was, well, if I can get in the same building as Montel, him being prior service, and just say, hey, brother, I need help raising awareness of veteran suicide. Maybe he'll care enough. And shout out to Eric Range, from Art 420 and, board chair Minorities for Medical Marijuana, because he said, hey, Jose, come down. If you can get a ride down here, I may be able to get you tickets. And I called my best friend again, Jude. I said, Jude, listen, I got some gas money. We can figure it out. Let's go down. And so, we went down to Fort Lauderdale on that Friday. We were able to get access, to get that private dinner. And the next day, on Saturday, I was fortunate to cross paths, with someone who, had a speaker's badge and said, hey, after meeting you, I think you should get this badge and, see if you can speak tomorrow at the conference. This will give you access to kind of like the backstage area. I'm like, for real? So I have this dorky picture of me holding the speaker badge. But so the next day, get up and go to the conference and use the speaker badge. I give my best friend my phone. I'm like, hey, man, maybe I can meet Montel. He's giving the keynote. I was like, so just, hit record, I guess. And so I'm kind of just hanging out behind the velvet rope, and like the media's there. I'm seeing athletes, and I'm just in complete shock. I'm like, wow, and my buddy's filming this from the crowd area. And I'm like, and all of a sudden Montel Williams just walks over to me. He's like, I met you last night. He's like, you're a veteran, right? He's like, you were talking about suicide. And I was like, yeah, man. I was like, I'm a combat vet. I quit my corporate job a few months ago. Cannabis has helped, me in my journey, and veterans are committing suicide every hour, and I need help getting the message out there. And he was froze, and his eyes were just watering in that moment. And he gave me one of these, and walked with me to a corner, and I got the photos of that. And in that corner for about 5 minutes, Montel Williams and I had a human to human, that's the whole thing. It's it's sad what happens to a lot of celebrities, that people just forget that they're human. It's when I've met people that are athletes, actors, whatever, it's always been, that's great what you do professionally. So, but I want to get to know you, because I want you also to get to know me, because if you get to know me, you'll understand what I'm fighting for. And so Montel and I have that. And he's like, listen, man, I got to give this speech. And he's like, as we're walking towards the stage, he's like, so who supports you and you're speaking in this whole thing? And I'm like, well, My wife, says it's a good idea. My best friend drove me down here. And he's like, well, who's like backing you in this? I was like, nobody, and he just kind of looked at me and he walked on the stage and he's, giving this speech and the media's there. And I'm just standing there like, what just happened? Wow. And then I start hearing the tone in his voice change and he pivots to the suicide conversation. And out of nowhere said, there's a veteran here. He has a story to tell. Jose, where are you? I spoke. I was crying. He was crying. They were crying. Everyone. By the time it was done, everyone was clapping. And as I walk off the stage, there's just all these people from the cannabis industry. They all generally had, humble and honest conversation with me about their own personal struggles with alcohol or drug or suicide, and because we're all going through something. And so in that crowd was a gentleman that to this day I consider a brother, and dear friend, Marvin Washington, Super Bowl champion with the Broncos, walks up to me and says, wow, gives me a hug and says, I need to talk to you. I want to help you get your message out there. He's like, I'm also a part of something that I think you deserve to be a part of. And I was like, okay. When Marvin called me a few days later, he was straight up with me and said, listen, man, he's like, I'm a part of something that could potentially change American history, if not world history. And after hearing what you said, I think it'd, be an honor to bring you in on a federal lawsuit that we're about to launch against the DEA, Department of Justice, and the United States of America, namely Jeff Sessions. Because at the time, he was, the head of the Department of Justice. He was the Attorney General. And then explains that it's him. And then there was a child named Alexis Portell, who was a medical cannabis refugee who had to leave Texas with her family to go to Colorado. These seizures, she was having, were going to kill her, and her family had to, for fear of the DEA and authorities coming, they moved to Colorado, and she had been seizure free for some time at that point. And then about a boy named Jagger Cott who had a terminal illness, Lay's disease, out of Georgia, whose parents don't consume, but they run the gauntlet of getting arrested and do what they have to do to make sure that this kid can outlive I think the Lay's disease lifespan is maybe 4 to 7 years old. That these parents were putting themselves on the line. I'm learning of this, but family's really going through in this. And then, for him as an African American, trying to, be an entrepreneur in a space where, clearly scheduling is an issue. He's also an athlete, that within those ranks as well, they have their own issues with CTE and suicide. Nonprofit called Culture Association. That this whole team, compiled of Marvin and then I guess myself, would be coming together to sue to deschedule cannabis once and for all. And if you really looked at who was really coming at the DEA, the DOJ, I mean, it's like the Justice League. You have children, for crying out loud. If you don't have compassion in your heart for the vets, have compassion for the children and the families that are going through this. But, let's really look at what we have here. We have, an entrepreneur, an African-American man who's been successful, who's, had failed attempts due to bureaucratic laws in cannabis. You have veterans that are committing suicide at a rate of, one every 65 to 72 minutes, that if I was to travel right now, even though I have a medical marijuana card in Florida, right, to another state, let's say to Texas, I'll go to jail, I'll catch some, serious charges. And so veterans can't even cross state lines, with life-saving medicine if they have to, and it was just, against everything. It was unconstitutional. It just made sense. And he's like, but if you join this, just understand that you are suing and we are suing kind of the big players. And it was like, you know what? after speaking to the wife and the family, it's like, if I can be a part of something that none of us are getting paid, God bless Michael Hiller, Joe Bondi, Hiller PC, that these attorneys did this 1,000% pro bono, that we can launch a lawsuit that, well, let's say we don't succeed this go around, that maybe perhaps we can set a precedent. And that's exactly what happened. Pretty much, we launched that lawsuit in the summer of 2017, and that's what began, kind of to build the platform that I have today within the cannabis industry, as an advocate. I've been to Tallahassee to lobby days. I've been to the Capitol, as a member of, ASA, and sat in front of, senators and with congressmen, congresswomen. I've also, in that journey, my fight became so fierce because of the times that I would go to lobby, and sit with politicians, and they would say, well, because I would always lead in with veterans are committing suicide with all the factual data, that they would say, wow, yeah, I really use, their data against them, saying this is written by, get their support. Yes. What can we do to make an impact on veteran suicide? The second I pivot to medical cannabis and getting their vote, that's all of a sudden where it became, well, I personally support your route to help end veteran suicide by helping deschedule cannabis and making it available. I'm not willing to sacrifice my political career, because if I vote for cannabis, I'm going to piss off a lot of my colleagues. And when it's my time to submit a bill, I won't get the votes that I need. And that was it. I was like, holy shit. I'm sitting in front of, I'll never mention their names, but that when you have the people that are writing the legislation that are telling you that, hey, well, me as a person, I want to see you win. If it involves something that will negatively affect my political career or chances of reelection or getting a bill passed, I got to pass. And that's where, it was like, oh shit. Our case ultimately, made it to the Supreme Court, historic in that capacity. We were ultimately dismissed by the highest court, in the country. But if you really think about what this lawsuit did for cannabis as a precedent, and how we came and we pressed, if you look at the court dockets and read how, our first court case, February 14, 2018, in that courtroom in New York City on that day, you had a federal judge going at the Department of Justice, because the Department of Justice kept citing case law from the 70s as their logic to keep cannabis scheduled.
Wow.
And the judge was like, hate to tell you, DOJ, you better come with something better, because it's 2018 and that's not working.
Wow.
It was myself, Leo Bridgewater, another advocate I'd love to introduce you to, was right there. He's in the case too. And, we kind of just looked at each other. We're like, did he just kind of like slam the DOJ? But it was facts, but we also had to be careful because this is law. But again, it started to really, play forward in my mind for the future cases, or where, because while that case didn't ultimately get us to descheduling, let's look at what has happened since that case was launched in 2017, that during a pandemic, cannabis was good enough to be deemed an essential business to stay open in certain states, and that those cannabis businesses were responsible for keeping some communities afloat during the pandemic.
Definitely. They definitely have made an impact in the community. They absolutely have.
Correct. So what's been cool about all of this is that, while I've never had a strategy in how to get even to this platform to be on the Freedom Isn't Free podcast, is that I said, wait a minute, as we continue to grow, so long as we always, 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 always stay on mission. We stay on message. We can never be defeated, because that's one thing that combat taught me. While it may be the hardest, while it may be the most painful, while you may not understand why, if you stay the course on something long enough and you do not give up and you do not deviate, if you just stay, at some point it will hit.
Absolutely.
To where now I'm blessed to be on a podcast to tell the stories of heroes, of men and women who were real, who I broke bread with, that are no longer breathing, that I can honestly say were some of the most decent people. And it transcended race. That's what's and religion. That's what's been so heartbreaking about what America's going through, is that while we spent our time in hell, I bore witness to human beings looking at each other as human beings, Black soldiers, Asian soldiers, Puerto Rican soldiers, brown-eyed, blue-eyed, Jewish, Catholic, atheist, all those things literally go to stay lockstep to make sure he was okay, she was okay, and we were okay together, and some died in that process. So if in a war zone, I was able to see, perhaps not in the best of circumstances, but Martin Luther King's dream, to see, we owe it to him. He left a blueprint in words on what America was to be, could be, and shall be.
So what were your thoughts when you seen the rioters destroying DC, rioting at the Capitol, terrorizing our democracy? What are your thoughts? What came to your mind when you seen this?
It was hard to see, because, and I want to be careful on how I respond to this, because that uniform, serving, and this is also knowing that some of those that breached the Capitol, were service members themselves. What is to be understood is that our flag, or our country, for as imperfect as we are right now, whether we want to accept it or not, we have men and women in dangerous places. Some of them that will die today and we'll never know about, and will die tomorrow and we'll never know about, for us to live the life we live.
Absolutely.
And knowing that, I personally served with, I have brothers that, those of us from the Gunner Battalion, especially Alpha Battery, are forever linked, and bonded by what happened that December day and beyond. That we all love America in a way that when that Capitol was breached and feces was placed on the walls, and that I couldn't help but think of Stewart, of Duhigg, of McKeever, of Captain Saltz, of the ladies from the Wisconsin National Guard that died over, I think, of all of them, and how utterly shameful that if they were here, me knowing my buddies, that if they were there to witness that, but reality is they're not, because they died defending that, what is being destroyed. That my buddies, that they would just be heartbroken, because there's a line, always has been. I can't be a hypocrite because I don't agree with what someone says, because I fought for your right to say. I can't ever be upset for civil disobedience or for assembly, because it's written for us to be free and do so. But unfortunately, there's an invisible line, and that's what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. And I don't care the reasoning. I understand everyone has the right to their opinion. But what I saw in that assault on Washington was no different than if it was another terrorist organization doing the same. That and a lot of my brothers that, over the years we've just gotten to know each other, that we would have deep-rooted conversations of just how our forefathers and how it was just never intended for this. That there is an honor still in America. That there is. Wait a minute. This is not. No. That if we stay quiet for this long, and this is the result of that we no longer. No. This is not going to happen. And if you look at history, if it can happen once, it can happen again.
Yep, absolutely.
And so my mind looked at this operationally to where this is the beginning of something here that you can't prosecute them all. Most of them are now back out in America somewhere, maybe, your local pharmacist, maybe your kid's school. There's just all these people out there.
CEOs, bus drivers, nurses, yes.
So in my mind, I'm like, well, I will really tread lightly while I'm out here, America, because I just not with it. And that's where it got scary. It got scary in that when you see the National Guardsmen starting to get issued firearms, and a lot of people are like, well, they didn't have ammo. They didn't have people. Let's not be illogical here. How long would it take for a trained soldier to load his firearm? They know where the ammo is, and it would be quick. But it was the psychological preparedness that these National Guardsmen were maybe having to prepare their way. Hey, man, maybe this bayonet. Maybe I don't even have to use my rifle. I may have to go hand in hand with a dude from Tennessee that I grew up with, and now all of a sudden doesn't believe in this, and I place yourself in their shoes to where that's what I did. That it's like, because again, when we served in war in Iraq, we were still a representation of America, that and the good America, that justice, where we stood, this flag stood safe, and that still stands, especially here. And so, I thought to myself, okay, this happened, and now these guys are up there deployed, and some of them did have magazines, and there's some dev group guys up there, and there's people up there, and I started to really play this out in my mind. I'm like, wow, if you have soldier here at the Capitol, and then you have this person who doesn't agree with everything over here saying, hey, soldier, I'm going to come at you and don't care what happens in the process because I'm trying to topple this Capitol that you're there to stand and defend. That soldier will just look at that individual dead in the eyes and understand what you just said, but then will say, I understand that, but you can't go back here. And please don't do anything to even go back there, because if you go back there, I'll have to use deadly force. Let's say this is a scenario. And let's say a person doesn't reply and says, you know what, let's see about that. Unfortunately, rules of engagement, there is a process. But if you're commanded by a soldier to stop and do not attack the Capitol and do it and try to harm those in it or the property, and I'm telling you to stop, and the orders, are as such to where lethal force is justified, or vice versa, to where a soldier gets shot. And I just started playing out this scenario in my mind. It's like, America, if y'all don't realize where we're at right now, that all it's going to take is a bullet to fly from one side. You kill a soldier in the Capitol while he's guarding. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, oh my, no. We're at the flashpoint where there's clearly a couple thousand people that are ready to go to arms. But it's like, I got my 7-year-old daughter asking me, Daddy, what's going on in DC? Because if it can happen up there, it can happen in my neighborhood. It can happen anywhere in America. And that's, for me, when I saw what happened in DC, was very eerily, it just reminded me too much of, kind of Baghdad. It's just like, wait a minute, there's something going on here. And if we don't really look at peace and hardcore dialogue as a solution, I'm concerned with the next election. That's really my concern at this point, is can we learn from that to when 2024 rolls around, be civilized and decent adults when, it's time, for Joe Biden to run for re-election. And I'm praying that in this, from it's coming. Maybe just kind of like, hey, it's only February, but you know what? My mindset is, how can we quell all the nonsense to a point that we can have decent dialogue? And one thing you learn in war, you don't catch W's all the time. Sometimes you catch L's. And if you lose, you lose. I have it on my conscience every day to be a good steward in any arena in which I may navigate, whether it may be when it comes to the flags, when it comes to Mission Zero, when it comes to being daddy, husband, that I must continue to walk that walk day in and day out. Because if it's one thing I know, we all know, is that Father Time catches up with us all, whether we want to or not, no matter how many reps you can do in the gym, how much, you eat good. At some point, the invisible clock that's above your head will hit zero. And none of us know when that is. It can be the end tonight for me. It can be in 20 years. I don't know.
Jose, I just really appreciate, you sitting down talking to us about, your transition, you developing your business. I mean, from beginning to end, you gave great details. So listen, if anybody wants to become an entrepreneur, this episode definitely gives you those details, but also how you became a cannabis activist. With all of this being said, who would you like to dedicate this episode to?
I appreciate that very much. So like I told you, last time, the name of the podcast, Freedom Isn't Free. At some point, I knew I was going to have to really ask myself, what does that mean to Jose Belen? And that would be very difficult, because then I would think of the multiple families out there, the Saltzes, Moores, and, then the Smiths, namely Mama D. Smith, Deborah Smith, whose son, United States Marine Corps Lance Corporal Antoine D. Smith, was killed in Fallujah, Iraq in November 2004. So today I'd like to dedicate, this to Mama D and her son Twan, as she affectionately referred him as, and also perhaps read a poem that I was reading about him this morning, and found a poem on one of the pages dedicated to him. And if it's okay, perhaps maybe to close the show, I can read this poem.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. Okay. Again, this is in memory of United States Marine Corps Lance Corporal Antoine D. Smith, killed in action, 15 November 2004. Don't grieve for me, for now I'm free. I'm following the path God laid for me. I took his hand when I heard him call. I turned my back and left it all. I could not stay another day to laugh, to love, to work or play. Tasks left undone must stay that way. I found that peace at the close of day. If my parting has left a void, then fill it with remembered joy. A friendship shared, a laugh, a kiss. Ah, yes, these things I too will miss. Be not burdened with times of sorrow. I wish you the sunshine of tomorrow. My life's been full. I savored much. Good friends, good times, a loved one's touch. Perhaps my time seemed all too brief. Don't lengthen it with undue grief. Lift your heart and share with me. God wanted me. Now he set me free.
Thank you so much for that, Jose. Thank you so much for sitting down with me and our listeners. Just giving us literally, guys, I could talk to Jose all day. He has so much power and amazing conversation about all the things that he has done successfully in his life, from being a soldier to now an entrepreneur, an advocate. an activist. Jose, thank you so much for supporting me and the Freedom Isn't Free podcast. Thank you so much. I feel very honored to have this discussion with you.
It was an honor to be here, and thank you for honoring their lives and their memory. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your host, Laura Figures, with the Freedom Isn't Free podcast. And if you haven't thanked a veteran today, ladies and gentlemen, please go out and thank a veteran. I'm out.